He's like, Joe Rogan is still on big horse. He's still riding that horse train. Holy fuck.
And they had a giant drop off.
And like, the shitty thing is, the absolute clowns at CNN didn't differentiate between, you know, making the jokes, the memes for the lulz about, you know, the horse pace and all that kind of stuff, and actually said that Joe Rogan was taking horse pace, which is just factually incorrect. And now everyone's like, oh wow, CNN are the liars. Maybe Joe Rogan was right all along. Maybe we should all take ivermectin. I was going to talk a little bit about Big Horse today, actually. I can skip right ahead of that.
Well, even if you don't have health care, the thing about ivermectin is that it's very inexpensive. Whether or not it actually works as the people that are proponents.
It doesn't. We've now got the redacted clinical trials. We've got numerous clinical trials that show that it is either not effective or the same as a placebo in terms of treating or preventing COVID-19. So, yeah. There's that, Joe.
Of it.
Right.
Think it does. Remains to be seen.
Did you give it out for Halloween?
I gave it to everybody.
Okay, because I heard that you were giving it out for
I got
Halloween.
a room full of it in my house. I opened up
you're
the
just
room.
giving it out to people.
I open it. It's like, it sounds like angel voices.
Yeah. And it's just, I feel like you have a
ivermectin.
DuckTales vat of ivermectin that you swim in every day. Just like, you know, remember DuckTales? They had the
Cash.
coins.
Yes.
It's just you and ivermectin just doing backstroke in ivermectin.
I never thought that was going to be a big deal. I really didn't.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny because a lot of people who are really scared about dying from COVID-19 tried to get their hands on it and couldn't get access to it because doctors aren't supposed to prescribe it for COVID-19. So instead they actually ended up taking the stuff that's intended for animals, and then they got really sick, and then they all called poison control. So that's why it's hilarious.
When I was bringing that up, I was bringing it up because it was a thing that was on a laundry list of stuff I took. It was
now
one
it's,
of the things.
Yeah, it's forever associated.
Connected to me.
Isn't it funny that like a year ago, if they said you're going to be in this crazy controversy about a drug, you'd be like, what are you talking about?
Why would I do that? I don't know. That doesn't even make any sense.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that's been very strange about this is watching how people get very, there are certain things in society where people's quote unquote lived experience is like the most important thing.
Right.
If you identify as a different gender, whatever, if you are mentally unwell and say, I can't perform certain duties, you go, I respect that. But if you say, I took ivermectin and I felt better, people turn around and go, shut up. It's weird.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Okay, first off, when we're dealing with a disease, and I don't know why they had to bring gender into this, but when we're dealing with a disease, we want to, I guess, relay the most responsible information possible. So we have to look at broad studies, considering none of us podcasters or streamers are doctors or have any medical experience. We basically have to listen to the broad consensus of the medical community. So for individuals like this to come out and say, well, guess what? I tried something, drinking lemon juice seems to have cured a variety of diseases I once had. So you too can do this. I mean, that's a little harmless and benign. If you say, hey, by the way, Comox mixed with Pepto seems to cure another variety of diseases. Well, that's a little bit more insidious because if people go out and they drink that, they could get very seriously ill. And in the case of the ivermectin, people didn't have access to ivermectin prescribed by a doctor for people, so they were taking the horse paste, and that's intended for horses. To be honest, that's why Joe Rogan saying I was going to die if I didn't have the kitchen sink, if I didn't do all these therapies, monoclonal antibodies, all this other stuff, and also I took a lot of ivermectin, and millions of people listen to that who don't have access to healthcare. That's a very dangerous thing. In the preprint, Andrew Hill, Manya Merchandi, and Victoria Pilkington reanalyzed the studies that went into the recent meta-analysis, which I should add, they have already retracted. Let's look at their new analysis. In the original study, one of the promoters of ivermectin often cite into support of their arguments. Hill and their colleagues looked at the data from 24 different studies of ivermectin and concluded that on average, it did seem to reduce the mortality from COVID-19. But then they found some of these studies were fraudulent and others had been so heavily biased that they didn't even trust their own findings. They retracted their own study just a month after it was published. Kudos to them. Now they've gone even further. They went back and regraded those 24 studies based on how biased or otherwise flawed flawed they were. Their new report explains that there's a very strong correlation between the amount of bias and apparent benefits of ivermectin. In other words, the more biased the study, the greater the benefit. When they excluded the biased studies, the benefits simply disappeared. In other words, the data from the high-quality studies showed that ivermectin doesn't work. The lowest quality studies were conducted in Iran, Turkey, and Iraq, and the worst of all were 2 potentially fraudulent studies out of Egypt and Lebanon. In the Egyptian study, it was revealed that 79 participants were duplicates, some deaths were recorded on dates before the trial had started, and instances of plagiarism were identified in the text. So apparently Tucker Carlson, Fox News' biggest promoter of ivermectin, prefers studies from Iran, Iraq, Egypt, and Lebanon over much high-quality studies out of, say, example, Colombia. But why the heck is anyone getting medical advice from Tucker Carlson? The second new article appeared in The Atlantic last week, written by James Heathers, a data scientist who has uncovered flaws in multiple studies of ivermectin. Heathers' summary of the problems is terrific, and I highly recommend that readers check it out, but I'll share a few tidbits here. Heathers describes the process of digging into the details of these studies, which is difficult and thankless. He's not paid to do this. He's just a good scientist who cares about the integrity of the literature, and it obviously bothers him when he sees shoddy science that is passed to peer review. We do it because we often feel it should be done. One of his main points is that bad studies get published all the time, and they simply remain out there because who has the time to go through all of them? Most of them don't matter, and they're quickly forgotten. In the case of ivermectin, Heathers found flaws in the study after study. More telling, he observed that the same phenomenon that Hill, Michandani, and Pilkington found, the biggest benefits of ivermectin appeared in the worst studies. And so this meta-analysis that a whole bunch of people were using, including like Jimmy Dore, to be like, you know, fucking these are the benefits of this drug for people to prevent catching ivermectin. Unfortunately, once you correct or remove the flawed studies, the retracted studies, all of a sudden, all the benefits of the drug disappear. So taking it for COVID-19 at this time is proven to be no more effective than taking lemon juice or sugar or any other placebo you want. At least with the lemon juice and sugar, you'd have some lemonade.
Weird.
Well, they got tricked. They got tricked into doing this by the media. And the media over and over and over again said disproven, conspiracy theory, horse dewormer. They said all these things. But what they ignored is how effective it's been in other countries.
Right. Well, Japan, which is not an alt-right Reddit thread. Right. It's Japan.
Yeah.
They were like, we're authorizing the use of ivermectin.
They're still doing this? This is a brand new clip. This was like from his latest episode. He's like, Joe Rogan is still on Big Horse. He's still riding that horse train. Holy fuck.
And they had a giant drop off.
And like the shitty thing is, the absolute clowns at CNN didn't differentiate between, you know, making the jokes, the memes for the lulls about, you know, the horse pace and all that kind of stuff, and actually said that Joe Rogan was taking horse pace, which is just factually incorrect. And now everyone's like, oh wow, CNN are the liars. Maybe Joe Rogan was right all along. Maybe we should all take ivermectin.
Of COVID cases.
Right.
The same thing happened in parts of India.
You can get it in Texas. Like when I had COVID, my doctor just wrote me a prescription for ivermectin.
Some doctors. I know a doctor who's actually being brought in front of the medical board, being subpoenaed because this doctor prescribed ivermectin to patients with COVID, and they want to know why.
Well,
so this is actually
like saying this like it's a conspiracy or something, as in like, oh yes, big medical science trying to crush. It's probably big pharma trying to crush a doctor prescribing ivermectin. No, it's because he's prescribing a drug that hasn't been proven to be effective for what he's prescribing it for. That's like, I'm not a doctor. I have no medical experience, but I can tell you that's not good. I believe that's the official medical term. Not good.
Like they're being brought in front of a fucking board about a drug that if you go to the critical care frontline COVID critical.
Oh, nice. Okay, so I now know exactly what he's talking about. Back in the day, I wouldn't have, but when I was preparing for that, let's just say discussion with Glenn Greenwald that he backed out of, the Fox News clip with Glenn Greenwald, where he's like, by a miracle drug, you're talking about doctors as accredited as Dr. Fauci, and some of them have even testified before the Senate that this drug holds not only promise, but could potentially cure COVID. The doctor he's talking about is one of the founding members of the organization that Joe Rogan just mentioned, an organization which, as I'm sure you saw the episode that I did on it, is riddled with shady and sussy stuff, including getting multiple rejections of having their studies published in medical journals because of a whole bunch of problems found with them. One of the members left the organization because in their list of preventatives for COVID-19, they haven't officially put vaccines. And their statement when asked on vaccines is that vaccines are a part of the plan. They still won't put it in their list of preventative measures for COVID-19. So one of the doctors dropped out. It's incredibly sketch. And the fact that like the intellectual dark weeb between, Glenn Greenwald, Joe Rogan, Jimmy Dore, they all keep referencing this organization is incredibly asinine, to say the least. Like, it's also, it sucks. Because, like, the people who watch and listen to Joe Rogan, they're probably loving this whole narrative. It's like, oh, fuck, there's a conspiracy here. This is wild, Big Pharma, most likely, I'm guessing. They prevent us from talking about all these other alternatives that we could have. Like Ivermectin and fucking Regeneron, which is produced by Big Pharma. Like, that's the other thing. They're into all these alternative therapies, alternative medicines for COVID-19, and a lot of them are produced by pharmaceutical corporations.
Care group.
Right.
People have done it for thousands of people. There's all sorts of at least anecdotal tales of people getting better after ivermectin. They do know.
Cool, bro. The problem with anecdotal tales is that, again, I could say anything. Like, fuck, this coffee cures HIV, right? That's not true. That's not true. And if I said that, and people listened to it, and then they started drinking coffee because they had a serious disease, then we have a very serious problem on our hands, That's why anecdotal evidence is not what you should base medical decisions on, Dr. Rogan.
Know that it stops viral replication in vitro, which means in a lab culture.
Yeah.
They do know that other countries have reported significant success. They have these RCTs, these randomized controlled trials that they can list over and over and over again about ivermectin.
Again, so when you go to the actual meta-study on ivermectin, once they've removed all the retracted and fraudulent studies, specifically the ones out of Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, then all of a sudden the meta-study shows exactly what everyone has been saying for a while, that ivermectin has no proven efficacy at either preventing COVID-19 or treating it. Also, fun fact, the doctor for the organization that Joe Rogan's talking about, the one who testified before the Senate, the same one that Glenn Greenwald was all about-y, the same one who said that ivermectin can effectively prevent the transmission of COVID-19 by up to 100%, which again is just magical mumbo-jumbo, he caught COVID-19 while on ivermectin therapy. While taking his own ivermectin fucking routine, he caught COVID-19. So, yeah. Merry horse pace to all of you, and a good horse paste year, a pasty year of horses and paste and horses. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Just, we beseech thee to smite down our enemies. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your humble court jesters, here to amuse you. To our lords, Trevor R., we give thanks for this spit of land for us to eke out this meager existence. To our knights, Merid, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Ellie Leslie, Alex P., Brandon, Words Greenwood, Nate, that one guy, Hagbird Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Daniel Sutton, Coulter Smith, Val 9000, Jenna Tall, Quiet 185, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, The Tim Caucus, Multi Mondi, Trevor Yanis, Lemmy 101, Anthropophojack, Saren 42, Catherine, Radical Maniac, Ramon Acosta, Nkosin, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Political Puppy, Andreas Chiringuito, Zach Christensen, Josh Mickelson, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We raise our flag in a veil, and we salute you, our friends.